So, Jules, the Cabbage Tree race is done and dusted, and now we've got 3 weeks to go for the Rolex Sydney Hobart. What did you do in those 3 weeks besides getting the rig set up for the race? Was there a lot more preparation you had to do?
Yeah, so that was pretty hectic, that last 3 weeks. So we'd had a few issues with our rig. And we'd done a lot of work over the winter to understand what rig settings we needed for different conditions. But we had consistent issues with our spreaders dropping, which is obviously not good. And it culminated in the Saturday before Christmas, a week before the Hobart. We had that windy nor'easter. I remember it was 25 to 30 knot nor'easter, and we went out we spent 6 hours getting the rig set up, and we came back in and the spreaders dropped again. So the whole thing was out of kilter. That was a bit of a real worry at that point. So we had J-boats in France on the case. We had the riggers over here on the case. And the learning in hindsight, we have got continuous D2s. So they come out round the lower spreaders and down to the deck. So there's quite an acute angle on those lower spreaders. If those D2s are relatively too tight, it creates downward force. And I think that's where we'd been going wrong. We had too much tension on the D2s. So the last week was really dominated by getting the rig secure. And we could see from the forecast, we were running routings concurrently we had Clouds Badham, Roger Badham. So he was providing daily reports from about 2.5 weeks out. We knew we were going to get this southerly. We knew it was going to be similar to Cabbage Tree. We knew it was going to be pretty bouncy. And we knew we had to get out into that current where the waves would be steeper. So we had to have the rig stable. Now, that kind of threw out all the work we'd done previously on our rig settings because we were going right back to the beginning with the rig. And it was on Christmas Eve, we were sailing, and it was about 5:30, 6 o'clock at night. We had Ian Short, who's a sailmaker, on the phone, on a video call, looking at the settings. And that was when we finally locked off the rig. And that was a great moment of relief, but it was incredibly emotionally draining getting that right. Because the old saying, to get there first, you first got to get there. And in fact, Clogs and I had a really unfortunate in the Sydney Hobart race. I think it was 2010. We got struck by lightning, and it took out our HF. And we were leading the Sydney 38 division by about 6 miles at that point, and we had to come back. And we did not want to. We had to get there, so we wanted everything to be safe and secure. And then of course there's the provisioning. And when there's two of you, you're doing everything. So as they were big 12-hour days that last week, I took the week off work, and I was down here at the CYC from 7:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. every day, trying to get some sleep at night, come back, do it again. And then we had Christmas Day to rest, and then we had Christmas Day was a disaster. So we've got this beautiful Labrador, and she's now 11, 12 years old, and 3 days before Christmas she was having breathing trouble. So she goes to the vet. Oh, we think she's got cancer. We think she's got this. Christmas Day morning, the dog can't get up. So we end up at the animal hospital. Christmas lunch goes on hold. We're at the animal hospital. We've been told we've got to say goodbye to the dog. So the emotions are built up. Now we're dealing with the poor dog. Happy ending on the story. The dog's still with us. She's come good. She didn't have cancer. But Christmas Day I was in floods of tears with the kids and the dog. And so there was horrendous preparation in that regard.
Oh dear, well. But take us to Boxing Day. The day arrived and the southerly was starting to forecast to be rather strong on Boxing Day night. But how'd you get away at the start? You're on your separate starting line, the fourth starting line?
Yeah.
You got down the harbour okay?
Yeah, we did just about. There was a few pre-race nerves, so we went out pretty early. And we just wanted to make sure the HF worked. So we'd gone out the heads, looked at what was going on, done the radio check, the HF works, we're okay. And we got off the start, and we got the spinnaker most of the way out. At least 3/4 of the way out. And I couldn't understand why the foot was dragging in the water. I was like, Clogs, what's going on? Anyway, we hadn't quite got the spinnaker all the way up, we discovered after about 200 metres. So we sorted that out. And it got very busy at the turning mark because we caught up start line 3 and possibly some of start line 2 in front of us. So we all concertinaed at the, we got around the sand pigs all right. And we got the kite down pretty smoothly just before that turning mark. And we managed to come through and get inside all the boats around us. So we got a good rounding there, did a short clearing tack, and then we were set up for the outer mark.
Very quickly, how do you drop the spinnaker?
So we got a Martin breaker, which is essential. So we're using asymmetric kites. So that's where we click on the autopilot very briefly. We chuck the halyard out the back, and then you blow the tack line, and that trips the Martin breaker. So both of you are in the cockpit, and at that point you open the halyard, and then one of you can just pull the spinnaker down through. We envelope drop.
The tack fires off, and then you haul it in.
That's right. So it's blowing downwind, and then you bring it envelope drop through the main and the boom, and you can pretty much do that single-handed. Just one of you doing that. And so we always raised and dropped kites with 2 of us on deck, but at that point I was steering, and Clogs in that instance dropped it straight down the companionway.
Okay, we're on the wind, we're out bumping around off the heads and got fresher and fresher. Talk us through the first night.
So the first afternoon was all right. It was 20 knots, 22 knots. And we'd worked out, again, knowing our sail settings well, that we could sail the number 4 and the full main, could, if necessary, carry us from about 12 knots to 30 knots. So we'd gone, and changing jibs is really slow and really hard when there's just 2 of you. So we'd learnt we needed to avoid that. So we had the number 4, and learning from Cabbage Tree, we'd gone into watches pretty early. So I think at 4 o'clock we started watches. So Clogs went down, and I was on deck of my own, and at 5:30 that first big squall came through, and that was 36, 38 knots, and it lasted for about half an hour. And it kicked, I think the breeze was just east of south, and it went back due south. So we were on port tack, and I was getting headed going down the coast. And there were a couple of our class were on the starboard tack, and they were getting lifted, but it was really, really windy. And I didn't want to tack the boat. I didn't want the sails flogging through the tack and risking damage.
So still full main?
Full main at that point. Yeah, I had the backs down pretty hard. And we held on to that. And then the minute the wind dropped down a bit, Clogs came back on deck, and we tacked the boat and went offshore. And at that point, we were trying to regain some of what we'd lost over the last half an hour to the boats around us. And the breeze, it eased back, but it sort of steadily built and dropped throughout the night. So I think we were seeing between 25, 30, 32, occasionally 33 knots all that night. And we kept pushing offshore. And we knew from the forecast, well, what we'd seen on the forecast was that the breeze along the coast was south. There was a sou'easter breeze offshore. So I thought, if we can get out there to that sou'easter and flop onto port tack, we've got a lift all the way down to Gabo. And so we woke up in the morning, we did the sked. We're in reasonably good shape at that point in time, and we got through the night all right. I think we lost the forehatch door, leapt off its hinges at some point in the game. That was the limit of the damage. So we got that tucked away somewhere safely, and we were sitting there about 8 o'clock in the morning doing watch changeover, and we were chatting away, and suddenly I remember Claude's going, "Oh, hang on, 10-degree lift, 20-degree lift," and we're like, "Oh, here we go," and we tacked over, and that was the. Hang on, am I getting that right? It must have been knocking. Sorry, knocking, because we were on starboard tack, 20-degree knock. We tacked over onto the other tack, and
beautiful.
That was beautiful. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting who was around us. So we had pretty big boats around us at that point. Love and War was with us then. We had a bunch of the 45-footers with us. Secret Men's Business was there.
So you kept the number 4 and full main all the way through?
Not the full main, no. We
reefed?
Reefed between, and we were able to go between, we can reef the main really quickly on your own on deck. So we were going between 1 reef, 2 reefs, 1 reef, all through that night. The minute we could take a bit of extra power, shake a reef out, and we did that on your own, click the autopilot on, hoist it up, bring it back down again. And
what about the navigation? Is one doing that, or you're both doing that?
so I probably led it, and then, so the way we'd learned as well, you've got to keep the navigation simple. So we had two tools. We had Predict Wind, which we use for our weather, and it's got a routing capability within it, and we had Expedition. And twice a day we're getting the weather updates, and we ran the routings twice a day. And then we imported that onto the chart plotter so we could just see in very, very easily where we were tracking versus what the routing was saying. But what we were always doing was looking around us at the conditions. We weren't using the routing as a sort of like a GPS in a car. We were using it as a guide and going, well, is what we're seeing different to what the routing says, and do we need to adapt strategy? And we'd have a sort of committee meeting twice a day. So we'd do the SCED, find out where everyone was, plot their positions, because I hadn't quite worked out how to get the yellow brick feed into Expeditions. So we were very reliant on those twice daily position reports. Download the latest weather, which coincided, import the routing, and then agree on our strategy. And then whoever was going off watch went to bed, and we carried on for the next 12 hours.
Well, then after that, it generally got lighter, and you just must have sailed beautifully to end up where you did, top of the fleet.
So the hardest part of the race was the Bass Strait for us. So the strategy of going out paid off. We were 75 miles offshore. A lot of our fleet had tacked back in overnight, and I think we had about a 45 mile lead on them as we hit Gabo Island. But we hit that trough line first. And in 1:12 overnight, I think it was night 3, we lost 25 miles, 25, 30 miles. I think the boats got within 15 miles of us. So they're taking a huge chunk out in 12 hours. That was really stressful. And we had Love and War with us, and we were doing 3 knots, 2.5, 3, 3.5, jibing down, trying to get through that trough line. And then we got out the other side, and as is the way, the breeze filled in from the north. So all the other boats stayed with us, and we had that absolutely glorious sail down past Flinders Island, 25 to 30 knots, northerly, spinnaker, one reef in the main, and we flew down there for about 8 hours till we got another southerly. The front came through that night. Got up to about 30 knots again that evening. So we got a bit of a knock, didn't last long. And then the next morning we woke up, well, we didn't wake, it got light. I think we were just north of Marara Island, and it was pretty light at that point. And that was quite a tricky day sailing down to Tasman Island, because it was 10 to 14 knots, deep running. We're an asymmetric, and we have boats around us with symmetric heights, and you can sail an asymmetric as deep as a symmetric height. Yes, you can, but when you've been sailing for 3.5 days and there's only 2 of you, it's quite hard to do. It's quite hard to do that. So we were trying to keep ground on those boats who we'd been with for 3 days, and we lost a bit there. We lost a bit on that run into Tasman Island, and we had to get round Tasman. We knew there was a shutdown that evening north of Tasman, and there was a stream of sou'easter air coming into the south coast there. And once we finally got round Tasman Island at 6 o'clock that night, we hooked into that southeasterly breeze, and we had a glorious run across past Cape Raoul, Storm Bay, to the Derwent.
And you knew by the computer that you were leading, well placed on handicap.
We knew where we were relative to the two-handers, and that was really all we'd focused on. Because this year, all we could win was the two-handed division, which I really hope that's going to change going forwards. I think that's going to change. I think what we've seen is that the two-handers don't have unfair advantages with autopilots, etc. Most of us aren't using them. They don't steer the boat as fast. So we were just watching the two-handed fleet. We knew we were in good position, but we were we had to go up the Derwent. That was the next challenge.
You made it.
Yeah, the Derwent. We got there at 10 o'clock at night, and as we touched the line of the iron pot, the final bit of breeze disappeared, and it took 4 hours from there to the finish.
Yeah. Well, I think, as I said at the beginning, you'll go down in history along with John Illingworth, who was the first winner of the Sydney Hobart race. You and Jan are the first winners of the two-handed division, so it's something you should be mightily proud of. And I mean, you look at your times; it was incredible in ORCI. You could have right at top of the pops, and then in IRC you're right up there as well. So I think everyone was in awe of your performance. But just before we finish, Jules, the name Disko Trooper Contender Sailcloth. Now we know where Contender Sailcloth came from because that's Clog's company that he runs here. Disko Trooper, tell us, what's that name all about?
So I was reading when I back to that very first boat. I was reading a book at the time called Captains Courageous by Rudyard Kipling, and it's a beautiful story in the late 1800s, based on the Grand Banks off Newfoundland. And one of the key characters in that was this skipper of a fishing smack, and he was called Disko Troop. And I thought it was a beautiful name, so I borrowed that from Rudyard Kipling.
Well, it'll live in history and the history of the Sydney Hobart race, that's for sure. So, what's the future now? Another two-handed Sydney Hobart race?
Yeah, I think we're working through what the future looks like. It was really all about crossing that finish line last year, so we've kept racing this year. We're off to Montague Island, which is half a Hobart, on Friday, 330 odd miles. Gold Coast later on this year, and then we'll go from there. Right. We're excited about maybe looking at some of the other races overseas as well. Fastnet, perhaps? I'd love to do that. Yeah, I'd love to go and have a go at the Fastnet again in the two-handed division. Well, a two-hander won it in, 2005, I think, or 2007. Yeah. The two-hander was the overall winner, so... That's right. Maybe. Could win a Hobart and a Fastnet. That'd be pretty good. So there we go. Yeah. Well, Jules, thank you very much, and I mean it sincerely. Congratulations to you and Clogs on the performance. It was remarkable. And good luck on the Montague on Friday, and good luck in the future. Thanks, Peter.